My name is Paola, and what you see here at my small finger is the coat of arms of my mother's family, the Gualandi. And here I'm happy and proud to share a story of the Decameron that speaks about my family, that speaks about one of my foremothers, Bartolomea Gualandi, one of the first feminists of my country. Once upon a time, back in the Middle Ages, there was in Pisa Messer Lotto Gualandi. Messer Lotto Gualandi was the chief of the Gualandi family, or better, of the Gualandi clan. As back in those times in Pisa, the Gualandi, together with other two families, the Sismondi and the Lanfranchi, hold the power of the city. They were noble, rich, powerful. They had their own army and castles, and they could count on tithes paid by the people living on their lands. They were the ones who created the law in Pisa and made sure the law was applied in the city according to their will. Now, Messer Lotto Gualandi, as all the people like him, as all his peers, had very many children, both boys and girls. He had 8, to be precise. And he used them as pawns in the big game of alliances and politics of the Italian peninsula. He considered his children his allies, and their duty to create alliances for the family and its advancement. And now let me tell you another little thing about the Gualandi family. They were not renowned to be a family of saints, quite the opposite. They are mentioned in the Divina Commedia by Dante Alighieri because they walled alive the Count Ugolino della Gherardesca in their own palace to punish him for his betrayal. Dante says, quali cagne magre, studiose e conte, Gualandi con Sismondi e con Lanfranchi s'avea messi dinanzi dalla fronte. He talks about them as thin and aggressive dogs. And now, Messer Lotto Gualandi, coming back to him, he had a daughter. And this daughter of his was special. It was his youngest. She was a beautiful girl, 16 years old. She was not only good looking though, she was also very clever, intelligent, well-tempered, well-educated. She could write and read, sing, had a pleasant conversation. She could play an instrument, ride a horse. She was the perfect match for any good family of the peninsula. And now Messer Lotto Gualandi really wanted to play well this special pawn. But let me tell you one thing. As he was considering who would be the perfect match for his special daughter, he thought, being the Gualandi family sometimes in trouble with the law, when they exceeded in violence and overpower, he thought that the best match for the family would be a man of law. If they had a man of law on their side, they would be invincible. And this is why he made his research and he found out that the best lawyer of Pisa, not only of Pisa, the best lawyer of Tuscany and amongst the top of Italy was Messer Ricciardo da Kinziga. And he decided his daughter Bartolomea would marry Ricciardo da Kinziga. Ricciardo da Kinziga was indeed a great lawyer. He spent all his life on books, and let me tell you, he was a good lawyer indeed because he was over 60 years old, skinny as a carrot, with his skin pale, his hair gray. He never had a woman in his entire life. So devoted he was to his career and job with the law. But when he heard that none other but Messer Lotto Gualandi was offering him his beautiful daughter in marriage, he thought the time had come for him to start a family. Did anyone bother to ask Bartolomea about her opinion? Of course not, because back in the time, it was the parents' job to find a suitable match for their children. So nobody asked about Bartolomea. And Bartolomea, I told you, she was a good-mannered girl, and she didn't object to the choice of her father. And so the big wedding was celebrated, and all over the streets of Pisa, wine and food was served free to everyone, and there was entertainment and music and dancing and storytellers all day long. And when the party was over, as it was custom, the couple was brought to their room. And now, here starts the problem. Ricciardo da Kinziga likes Bartolomea very much. He's not a fool. He knows that he had been so blessed and fortunate to marry one of the fairest ladies of his town. And he loves her and he likes her. But when he finds himself in bed with her, he tries to caress her. But nothing. He kisses her. Nothing. He goes close to her. He looks at her. She's beautiful. And he feels something stirring up down there. But when he's about to fulfill the act, nothing. He tries all night long. He tries hard. But every time he's almost there, nothing. Ricciardo da Kinziga is now worried. What people say if he cannot do the act the first night of their wedding? But before dawn, he focuses. He tries his best. He concentrates, and eventually, in less than a minute, he makes it. He managed to do the act. Now, the morning after, at breakfast, his wife, Bartolomea, is waiting for him, sitting at the big table downstairs. And here Ricciardo da Kinziga comes down, dressed in his silk night dress, and below his arm, he has something. He has a scroll. He comes to the table, he opens the scroll at the table, and Bartolomea sees it is an almanac. An almanac is the medieval version of a calendar. And now Messer Ricciardo da Kinziga points at the almanac and says, "Bartolomea, my dear, you know the thing that we did tonight?" Bartolomea looks at him. She hardly remembers anything happened during the night. "You know, Bartolomea, that act we did tonight, it's forbidden by Holy Mother Church." Forbidden by Holy Mother Church? Bartolomea might be a medieval woman. They didn't speak a lot to girls about those stuff, but one thing she knows, and she replies, "But well, my mother said that once you are married, it is allowed." "Ah," replied Ricciardo da Kinziga, "wife, I see that you are an ignorant woman. Let me school you. This act is forbidden by Holy Mother Church in many days of the year, and let me show you which." And he starts. The Holy Year begins with Advent. Advent is the pregnancy of Our Lady the Virgin Mary. Of course, you don't want to do these things during Advent. Then it's Christmas. Christmas, Our Lady the Virgin Mary delivers the baby Jesus. You cannot do it. Then it's Christmas time, 40 days after Christmas. Of course, you cannot do it. Then there is Carnival. Yes, for almost a week, it's kind of allowed, but then Lent, you will abstain from the pleasure of the flesh. You cannot do it in Lent. Then Easter, resurrection of our Lord. Then Easter time, 50 days after Easter. And then Ascension, and so on and so on. Out of the whole year, only almost 12 days were left. Bartolomea looked at him, as he wasn't sure about what he was talking about. But she didn't disagree. She knew it was a wife's duty to obey her husband. And so she just said, uh-huh. And their life went on. And now let me tell you, Ricciardo da Kinziga, as I said, he likes his wife very much and he wanted to make sure she was happy. So he bought for her new dresses, he brought her to concerts, he brought her to banquets and parties, he bought for her fine shoes, nice jewels, he gave her anything a woman can dream of, but that one thing. And as days went by, Bartolomea started to wither like a flower. She became paler and paler each and every day. She stopped smiling. She lost the taste for life. And Messer Ricciardo da Kinziga tried to cheer her up at his best, until one day he had an idea, a great idea. He decided to go sailing out of the harbor of Pisa. And he proposed that himself and his friends would go on a boat and Bartolomea with her girlfriends on another. And they would sail out of Pisa and have a race. And by the way, this is the first recorded notice of any sailing race in the Middle Ages. And so they did. They went out of the harbor of Pisa, the girls on a boat and the boys on another, well, the men on another. And they started sailing. And all went smooth and nice, and Bartolomea started having good time. But after a while, all of a sudden, as sometimes happens at sea, the wind started to blow, and it blew hard and hard, and the waves raised high and tall, and the big storm broke up. Ricciardo da Kinziga, with his friends, he sailed back to shore, sure that the ladies would follow them. But when they got to the shore, they watched out and they saw the lady's boat was still far at sea. And then he saw something really scary, way scarier than the storm. He saw a big ship with square riggers approaching the small boat. Then something happened between the big ship and the girl's boat. And eventually the girls made sail towards the shore and the big ship took the sea. But when the girls came back to shore, Bartolomea was not there. Ricciardo da Kinziga brought his hand to his face, and the more so when the girls told him that Bartolomea had been kidnapped by the pirates. Kidnapped by the pirates, Ricciardo da Kinziga started screaming, shouting, crying, pulling his hair out of his head. His wife had been kidnapped by the pirates. Far at sea, on the pirate boat, the scene was almost the same. Bartolomea was on her knees on the deck, screaming, shouting, crying, tearing her hair out of her head. And next to her stood the captain of the pirate, Paganino da Monaco, pirate and gentleman. Paganino da Monaco was a young man, tall, strong, tanned, dark hair and dark eyes. He looked at Bartolomea with his handsome eyes and he said, "Do not get so distressed, my lady. Nobody here wants to touch you." And Bartolomea, when she heard this, started screaming even louder. And Paganino said, "Do you hear me? We will ask ransom and we will send you back to your family when your husband pays." Bartolomea kept crying even more desperately. Paganino da Monaco was at loss. The woman seemed not to understand his language, and so he tried different strategies. He approached the girl's face and he caressed her. And Bartolomea stopped crying as if by magic. Paganino, encouraged, kept caressing her a little slower and lower, and Bartolomea smiled at him. Oh, Paganino saw that she was indeed beautiful. And he said, "Look, Bartolomea, why don't we go and end up this conversation below in my cabin?" And Bartolomea hugged him, and together they went down in his cabin. And now I am an experienced sailor. I crossed the Atlantic twice on a sailing boat. And let me tell you, with the rocking of the boat and the waves and the wind, it's just fantastic. And Bartolomea and Paganino had the best of times, not only that night, but all travel long, until they got to Monaco. When they got to Monaco, the minute Bartolomea saw the city, she went into a despair. She ran to Paganino and said, oh my God, and now you will ask my ransom, and now my husband will pay you, and now you will send me back home. Before you do it, I will kill myself." Paganino looked at her and said, "No need for this. I am rich. I don't need your ransom, and I've come to love you as my true wife. If you agree, therefore, I will keep you in my house as my honorable wife." And so they did. Bartolomea started living with Paganino da Monaco as his wife, having the best of life. Did they live happily ever after? Well, I'm afraid you have forgotten about Ricciardo da Kinziga, the famous lawyer. He had made his research. He had found out who had kidnapped his wife, and he had set his mind to go and rescue her. He had paid for a big ship to be armed from the harbor of Pisa, and he himself had sailed all the way through the Mediterranean Sea to Monaco. As soon as his ship came to Monaco, people started talking. You know, in Monaco, everyone knew each other. And soon enough, the voice spread that Ricciardo da Kinziga had arrived to rescue his woman. And when Bartolomea heard of it, she went in a frenzy of panic. She ran to Paganino and she said, my husband is here under disguise. He pretends he's a merchant, but he truly wants to take me back to Pisa. You have to do something or I will kill myself." And for the second time, Paganino replied, "Do not get so worried. I will keep you here as my wife, as I promise. And I have a plan." Ricciardo da Kinziga, feeling he was very smart indeed, tried to make acquaintance with Paganino da Monaco. That swallowed his hook and pretended to become his friend. And one day he invited Ricciardo da Kinziga in his palace. And now Ricciardo da Kinziga was all emotional. He was about to see his wife again. Oh, he had dreamt about it so many times. But the moment he stepped in the house, Bartolomea was not there. Paganino da Monaco welcomed him, offered him food and to drink, the best of wines. They had dinner together, no woman. By the end of the evening, Ricciardo da Kinziga said, "Sir, in this house I know you host a woman." And Paganino replied, "Of course, this woman is my wife." No, said Ricciardo, "there is a mistake. The woman in this palace is my wife." Paganino da Monaco put his hand on his sword and he said, "My lord, I've welcomed you as an honorable guest, but if you now come to my house and say that my wife is your wife, we're not friends anymore." Ricciardo da Kinziga said, "Call the woman and we shall see." And Paganino da Monaco said, "Fair enough, of course, my wife will tell you that she is indeed my wife." And he clapped his hands. And shortly after, as serene as the statue of the Virgin Mary came Bartolomea Gualandi. She smiled at Paganino with affection, and she looked at Ricciardo as if she had never seen him. And Ricciardo da Kinziga went forward and said, "Bartolomea, my love, come here and hug me. Eventually we are united." But Bartolomea looked at him and said, "Sir, I've never seen you. I believe you are mistaking me for somebody else." But Ricciardo insisted, "Bartolomea, my wife, I know you're scared of this man, but come here, I will protect you." "Sir, I'm afraid you are taking me with somebody else." And the thing went on for a while, until Ricciardo said, "Now, leave us alone. You have scared this woman so much that she doesn't even dare to talk to me freely." Here Paganino da Monaco replies, "Mister, you've come to my house as an honorable guest, and now you ask me to let you alone with my wife. Don't you know this is improper and unpolite? But I trust my wife so much that she is welcome to speak with you alone." And by so saying, Paganino da Monaco went out of the room. And here Bartolomea stands in all her splendor in front of Ricciardo. And Ricciardo says, "Bartolomea, my dear, now come to me, hug me. Eventually you are free to speak." But she says, "Messer Ricciardo da Kinziga, I believe you'd better go home because I don't know you." But as he insists and insists, eventually Bartolomea changed register and says, "Messer Ricciardo da Kinziga, do you really believe that I'm such a simpleton that I haven't recognized you at first sight? But well, let me repeat to you my piece of advice. You'd better go back to Pisa without any further fuss, because I want to stay here and live with this man." "Bartolomea, my love, you want to live in sin with a pirate?" "I want to stay here with Messer Paganino da Monaco, because you remember the almanac that you brought to the breakfast table the day after our wedding night? Well, Paganino da Monaco has lost his almanac at sea." And this is the story of Bartolomea Gualandi and Paganino da Monaco.